Spoštovani gospod Župan, Zoran Janković, dear mayors, ladies and gentlemen, it's a great privilege that I'm able to speak today to you. The privilege, it's in all because this will be probably the longest lecture you have heard. But I will try to keep you not boring for 45 minutes, which is quite a difficult task. The structure of the presentation will be, first I would like to explain you how I see the world in which we live and the challenges we are facing. Then, in connection with the Sustainable Development Goals, the economic model driving our lives, all that will tell you about the reasons why circular economy is so important and why we need to focus on it. Then a bit on the resource management from our recent IRP, its International Resource Panel abbreviation, and finally going to the circular economy. Then on the cities, Sustainable Development Goals and the circular economy, leadership, governance and the role of European Union, and finishing, of course, with some conclusions. Let us start with the world in which we are living. This is part which I regularly repeat because I would always like that everybody understands the real essence of the problems in which we are facing. This is based on a very prominent research work done by Stockholm Resilience Institute. Mr. Rockstrom actually started it. They defined 9 planetary boundaries. And in these planetary boundaries, we can see where we are and where we have major problems. In 2 areas, in the area of management of phosphorus and nitrogen, which is fertilizers management, and in biodiversity disappearance, the red ones, we are already beyond the zone of uncertainty, in the high risk. In 2 areas, in the land system change and in the climate change, we are in the zone of uncertainty, where the risk is increasing. Laser is unfortunately not seen on the screen, but anyway, I will try to explain it in a way that you could follow. So if you think thoroughly, all 4 areas are very closely related to the way how we produce the food. So the food systems of the future will be pretty much decisive on the way how we will be living, either this will be sustainable or not. Population, this is the picture of the 21st century. We have all got used that we will be 9.7 billion in 2050. If we translate that to a human language, that means that in 1 generation, you will have on the planet additionally 2.5 billion. 100 years ago, the overall amount of population was 1.4 billion. In 1 year, you have additional Germany. In 4 years, you have additional United States of America. In 9 days and 6 hours, you have Slovenia. Everything that is happening more or less in least developed part of the world, which means that it's happening in the countries which are growing faster because they want to catch up with us, and rightly so, which means that the pressure on the resource use will be huge. About poverty and social inequality, 62 people own the same as half of population, and 1% in the world is richer than the rest of population. Nearly 800 million people are hungry, over 2 billion suffer from micronutrient deficiencies, while 2 billion people are obese. We throw away 1/3 of the food we produce. If we go to environment, the threat of the climate change was already mentioned. 60% of ecosystems are already degraded or used unsustainably. More than 85% of the world's fisheries are out or beyond their biological limits. 1/3 of soils is degraded due to various kinds of the reasons. 500,000 people in Europe dies prematurely due to air pollution, which is 15 times more than in the car accidents. And when it comes to plastic, 1 million of plastic bottles are bought globally every minute. 2015, we have recycled only 9% of the plastic, 12% was incinerated, almost 80% was either landfilled, but majority finish is in oceans. Urbanization, this is just a glimpse of the things which I will be mentioning later. Globally, an area of the size of United Kingdom has been converted to buildings since 1990. More than half of the cities which will exist in 2050, we haven't yet started building them. In the 3 years period, 2011-13, China has used more cement than United States of America in the whole 20th century when they were building the cities of United States. Half of the work will be able to be automated by the year 2055. This is the estimate of McKinsey Institute. The most important thing which you have to understand is that for the first time in a human history, us humans are living in a social ecological system of planetary scope. So we are more interconnected and interdependent than ever, which means that our individual responsibility and also collective responsibility for the future has enormously increased. I like this quote very much. In a world where external reserves of resources are limited and second chances are thus increasingly rare, humankind must develop the ability to proactively navigate away from this new kind of crisis, globally extensive and intersystemic, that could otherwise irreversibly degrade the biophysical and economic basis of human prosperity. Have we understood the problem? Probably yes, otherwise we would not adopt the Sustainable Development Goals, which I consider as a kind of global agreement among humans that we want to do the things in a different way. One of the conclusions which came from our IRP work is that trade-offs, of course, among various SDGs, 17 of them, are existing. But sustainable consumption and production is the most efficient strategy to avoid these trade-offs and create synergies to resolve them. So, if you want my advice, focusing on responsible consumption, on sustainable consumption and production, it's the name of the game. If we do not change the way we produce and consume, we can dream about eradicating poverty, zero hunger, and I can continue. But let us now look to the economic models which are driving our lives, how we are actually living. This will be a bit simplified, but it's not far from the truth. Price signals which we are sending on our markets. Financial capital overvalued, human capital undervalued, natural capital practically not valued at all. Then this goes to the markets where producers, consumers meet. We behave rationally, and then we are surprised that we are living in an economic model where we have economic, social, and environmental imbalances. So we should simply not be surprised, because these are the signals which we are sending to the market. I was 5 years as Commissioner for Environment fighting that we would have equal understanding of the importance of economic, social, and environmental issues. In essence, this is wrong. What we would need to really fight for is that all socio-technical systems providing social needs and values would respect the ecosystem's limits in which we are living. If I translate it to a bit more complicated graph slide, which was done by European Environment Agency, all socio-technical systems actually need to be in kind of limits which are given to us by our home, which is hosting us. Major problem in all that system is connected to environmental externalities. Let me explain to you what actually environmental externalities are. On the upper part of the picture, you have in various sectors the profit which we are measuring, because this profit is measured not including the costs of the natural capital. On the bottom line, you have where you get if you are including the costs of the natural capital. They would from profit become losses. And the problem of that is that in many cases costs do actually exist, but we deny them. Simply we don't calculate them. I've heard many times that we cannot introduce that and that because this will increase the costs. No, the costs are there. They are paid either by health system, by the people who are ill, or they are paid by farmers who have less production, or normally they are paid by the next generations. Why? Because they cannot complain to us. So, privatizing profits and socializing the costs is the model which will simply not work. This is an estimate which we have done in Systemic, where we have calculated what would be the unpriced environmental damage costs percentage of the global GDP, and we came to the figure which is approximately 13%, connected to greenhouse gases, freshwater use, land use, pollution. If you look to the various kind of measures of social development, more those measures include natural capital, more are they showing you that actually you are not growing as fast as we are recording it through the gross domestic product, GDP. So if you go to Human Development Index, Genuine Progress Indicator, Inclusive Wealth Index, you find out that in essence you are growing slower. There are few messages which I would like that you remember. The growth in the past was actually good growth, but it was also bad growth. We don't know how much of that growth was actually good. All the politicians are focusing on GDP growth rates. In essence, what decides how good you will live, it's the level which you have reached. You don't go to the shop and buy with the growth rate. You go there with what you have actually accumulated as your salary. We are all focusing on flows, but in essence, stocks do also matter. While in European Union, we have clear rules that we should not in-debt when it comes to budget. You know this rule of 3% which you cannot cross. We have no rules when it comes to indebting in environmental sense. On the contrary, we stimulate that. We have a lot of subsidies. By the way, maybe you don't know, but according to OECD countries have from the year 2000 till 2014 increased fossil fuel subsidies more than it was the growth of their GDP in the years where they were all talking about fighting climate change. And finally, if somebody is growing 7%, doubling of everything what they consume and produce will be in 10 years. That's the growth rate of China today. So, it's not helping if you are walking faster, if you are walking in the wrong direction. And that's the thing which we have to take into account when it comes to economic systems. Let us now focus on some of the results from our reports of the International Resource Panel. This is our philosophy. Human well-being can grow faster than economic activity, but economic activity should grow in a way that it's not tied to the growth of resources. So you shouldn't use as much energy, water, and so on, and other resources as it's the growth of economic activity. We call that resource decoupling. So the growth of economy should decouple from the growth of resources, while both the economic activity and resource use should decouple from environmental impacts. And we call that the impact decoupling. In the midterm, except in specific cases, the resource shortage will not be the core limiting factor of our economic development. But the environmental and health consequences caused by this excessive and irresponsible use of resources will be. To translate you that, to be understood easier, it will not be the shortage, I don't know, of a steel or cement which will limit the development of Chinese cities, but it will be the quality of air which will point that we have to reorganize our lives because the existence of the political leadership depends on that, even in China. On two reports which we have published recently. One is on the global material flows, resource productivity 1970-2010. Just 4 conclusions. In the last 40 years, consumption has been a stronger driver of growth in material use than population growth. It means that it's more about economy than about the growth of population. Second, the richest countries consume on average 10 times more materials than the poorest. Since the year 2000, material productivity has globally, that's the use of materials per capita, has decreased. Even if we are more resource productive in all the countries, we are facing a structural shift from resource efficient countries like European Union, Japan, to resource less efficient countries like China, India, and so on. So globally, we have a negative trend. And finally, the level of well-being achieved in wealthy industrial countries cannot be generalized globally based on the same system of production and consumption. I will try to explain you that in this slide. On the horizontal axis, you have Human Development Index. Better you live, more right you are. On the vertical axis, you have ecological environmental footprint. Higher you are, higher it's your footprint. The dots are the countries. The dots surrounded red on the right-hand corner are European Union member states. The green corner on the right contains all the countries where people are living well within the planetary boundaries. None countries in the world are living like that. The problem is that we are all first going right and up, and then when we are right and up, we start to move down. Those countries who are on the left down are simply not in a position to repeat our development pattern because there are no such resources existing. But the real responsibility, it's not on them. The real responsibility, it's in the developed part of the world. We are those who have to show that we are ready and able to move down. We master knowledge and technologies. And if we will not share with them, we will have a disaster in the world. Why resource efficiency is important and useful? Because we need to assure availability of resources in the future because of the volatility of resource and commodity prices, because of national resource security, because of negative environmental impacts of resource extraction and use, and finally, because there are various opportunities if you use resources more efficiently. From the report which we have recently published and prepared for G7, there are 4 major conclusions. First, with concerted action, there is a significant potential for increasing resource efficiency. Second, markets will not achieve higher rates of resource efficiency by themselves. Public policy and political will be needed. There are significant barriers to the increases in resource efficiency, but they can be removed. And finally, improving resource efficiency is indispensable for meeting climate change targets cost effectively. What does that mean? COP, I was also in Bonn last days. COP is focusing on this, climate change and greenhouse gases. But if we want really to deal seriously with the climate change, we need to add the stories of the land, water, materials, and only if you take the resource management and the carbon management together, which is in essence something which we can call low carbon resource efficient economy, then we have real chances of success. By the way, this story of decoupling is the story which is instrumentalized in the circular economy logic. The thing which we have found in our research is that the major problem is that not everything what is resource efficient, it's also economy efficient. This, because of the externalities which I explained before, and because a lot of our policies in taxation and other policies like subsidies are simply not fit for the purpose. So we should rather support that we are paying for labor to save materials rather than for materials to save the labor, which is currently the way how we are doing it. The role of the circular economy. This is the most popular explanation of the circular economy. It's a butterfly produced by Ellen MacArthur Foundation. On the left-hand side, you have renewables flow. On the right-hand side, blue, it's the stock management materials. Circular economy, in one sentence, it's an economy in which you try to keep resources as long as possible in the production and consumption system. You can do it by designing the products differently, by organizing the production system differently, by reorganizing, the business models, or by simply influencing on consumers that they behave in a different way. Nobody will prescribe you. You have to know what works best in your environment. There are two things of the biosphere on the left and the technosphere on the right, which you need to connect through the human sphere. So the concept should be human-centered. If it will not be human-centered, if we will not be able to answer through that model also on eradicating poverty, for example, it will become another one of Western models which will not be accepted globally by the least developed countries. One thing which is also quite important, we haven't talked about that, is how the bioeconomy, that's an economy which is dealing with renewable resources, is actually connected with the rest of the circular economy logic. The bioeconomy, it's connected to this part which is biotic resources. And the thing which we have to think about is how some of the products which we currently build from various types of materials artificially could actually be replaced by products which have origin in a renewable way. Or if you want an example, you can build a house from cement, steel, and so on, or you can build it from the wood. One is renewable, one is non-renewable. But, of course, also the rules of sustainability should apply on this side. Bioeconomy, which is not respecting the rules of sustainability, has exactly the same problems as the classical economy. Cities, SDGs, and circular economy. It's not a coincidence that goal number 11, it's close to goal number 12, so sustainable cities and responsible consumption and production. How actually the cities fit in the circular economy story. Everything what you are doing, sharing models which you are introducing, mobility systems which you are changing, waste recycling systems which you are introducing, sustainable buildings, energy efficiency, and I can continue. All that is circular economy. All that are various types of the circular economy which you are introducing. Just to give you one example, which I haven't used for a long time, but it's very well explaining you the circularity and the need for circularity in the cities. It's connected to mobility. Typical European car, it's parked 92% of the time. 1% is sitting in congestion. 1.6% is looking for parking, so actually we are driving a car 5%. Even more, in that four-seater, it's on average 1.5%, which means that the utility of a car currently is 2.5%. The engine losses are huge. I will not explain you that, but the combustion engine, it's very inefficient. And if we add then the human-related death, then you get the full picture of how inefficient the car today is. But we shouldn't look only to the car of tomorrow, which will be different. We should look, and that's very important for you, the managers of the cities, to the overall mobility system in which this car would fit. And this is the whole kind of circularity answer which needs to be addressed through the logic of the system which we try to introduce. Here it's the story, how much is actually the overall cities, how much are the cities evolving, how much are actually they growing. This is from the OECD report. You can see in the big corner how much the cities are covering, and in the small corner inside how much they have grown from the year 1990. And you can basically see that in Europe it's not growing so fast, but in India, Indonesia, China, this is really growing very quickly. If I continue that story, also in the urbanized areas like ours, this is all the orange part, you see that the change of the build-up area is growing faster than the change of population. So you have very rare countries globally where the change of population will be quicker than it's actually the growth of the urban population. So to summarize, it's from the 2014 report on the prospects of urbanization. Currently, 3.8 billion people are living in urban areas. This is 54% of the global population. By 2050, it is expected this to rise on 6.3 billion, which is approximately 60% of the global population. If inequalities remain unchanged, 1/3 will be living in slums by 2050. 37% of the growth is expected to come from China, India, and Nigeria. There has been a historic densification trend of 2% per year. This threatens to increase. Global urban land use from just below 1 million square kilometers to over 2.5 million square kilometers in 2050, putting agricultural land and food supplies at high risk. This is how it would look if I would present it graphically. So you have from 2010 till 2050, and then you have various continents, but I will not go into detail. It is pretty obvious where the major things will be happening. In Quito last year, the new urban agenda, the roadmap for sustainable urbanization, was adopted. There are 3 transformative commitments which were reached: leave no one behind, sustainable and inclusive economies, and environmental sustainability. References to resource efficiency alongside low emission and resilience, housing, infrastructure, basic services. So this is the agreement about how the future of the city should look. We are just finishing in International Resource Panel the report which will be titled The Weight of the Cities, the Resource Requirements of the Future Urbanization. It was not yet published, and these are preliminary results. One thing which really you should understand, urbanization, it's expected to be more or less completed in the next 50 years. Half of the world is urbanized. The other half is urbanizing. So we have once in a lifetime chance to shift the expected urbanization onto more environmental, sustainable, and socially just path. If we miss that opportunity, we are in total mess. While for the cities like yours, the normal problem is more retrofitting. For those which we haven't yet started building, it's actually how we will build them. Reports consist of 4 main parts: the most comprehensive assessment of the resource requirements of the future urbanization, an assessment of the possibilities available to cities to shift on a more sustainable resource path, the governance strategy required to shift urbanization on a more sustainable trajectory, and conclusions and recommendations. Some basic facts about the resource use. Cities use billions of tons of raw materials from sand, gravel, iron, or to the biotic resources such as wood and food. Without new strategy, global urban material consumption will grow from 40 billion tons in 2010 to about 90 billion tons by 2050. This would exceed by far what the planet can provide in a sustainable manner. For sustainable use of global resources by 2050, the average material intensity of consumption per capita needs to be reduced from the forecasted 8 to 17 to 6 to 8 tons per capita per year. We have identified 4 systematically interrelated interventions which would be needed. First, special restructuring of the urban morphology to achieve strategic intensification. This is about well-articulated network of high-density nodes. Within nodes, the fostering of a richer mix of housing, jobs, and amenities at neighborhood level. Human-scale sustainable design. Conditions for livable functionality socially mixed neighborhoods, soft mobility at the city neighborhood scale levels, passive heating, cooling, lighting at building level. Resource efficiency of all urban components, such as vehicles, infrastructure, building, factories. Sustainable behaviors, the separation of waste at source for recycling, the use of public transport, walking, cycling, the use of public spaces. If we look to the opportunities which you would basically get by implementing that kind of policies, higher density and compact urban forms can reduce greenhouse gases for a factor of 2 or more. Human scale functionality, mixed neighborhoods, again for a factor 2 or more. Energy efficient buildings, again for a factor 2 or more. Efficient systems could achieve a further 20% of energy saving. Behavioral changes for a factor 2 or more. If we summarize, the cascading multiplicative effect of these impacts could include improve energy use by a factor of 10 times. So the opportunities are there. It's really the question how we use it. Finally, about the key principles of integrated urban planning. First, compact, articulated, and polycentric strategic intensification as opposed to only increasing average density. Second, agglomeration in nodes as opposed to agglomeration in a single area. Third, flexibility and alignment with market demand. Fourth, small perimeter blocks with active edges. Fifth, connectivity through scales, intercity connections, intra-metropolitan connectivity and local level, and a vibrant public realm. Six, mixed-use neighborhoods. At least 40% of floor space should be allocated for economic use in any neighborhood, and single function blocks should cover less than 10% of any neighborhood. 7, fine-grained, diversified plot patterns, and finally, green public spaces, natural systems, and bioclimatic urban fabric. These are kind of recommendations which are following from the report, which is before publishing, as I have mentioned. So, some general conclusions and orientations. Urban transition will not happen without appropriate urban governance arrangements. Urban experimentation is happening everywhere. The concept of urban experimentation may be emerging as a new mode of urban governance, sharing experiences between you and using those experiences. Far-sighted city governments are needed, and they need to become also global leaders. And here it's time that I remind you that we are hosted by the European Green Capital of 2016. Last thing which I would like to share with you, it's about the leadership, governance, and the role of European Union. The quote, which it's pretty much explaining the situation in which we are together living. We face a host of systemic challenges beyond the reach of existing institutions and their hierarchical authority structures. Problems like climate change, destruction of ecosystems, growing scarcity of water, youth unemployment, embedded poverty, and inequity require unprecedented collaboration among different organizations, sectors, and even countries. We are at the beginning of the beginning, how to catalyze and guide systemic change at a scale commensurate with the scale of problems we face and all of us see but dimly. There are 3 core capabilities that system leaders need to develop in order to foster collective leadership. First, helping people to see larger system and build a shared understanding of complex problems. Second, fostering reflection and more generative conversations. And finally, shifting the collective focus from the reactive problem solving to a kind of co-creating the future. You can, of course, ask yourself how many of that kind of leaders we have. Anyway, this is the way how a leader should think. The thing which I would like to mention you when it comes to the governance. Governance is extremely important. if we look to the problems which I have explained before, and if we understand that we have globalized trade, globalized economy, globalized internet, globalized mobility, globalized climate change, globalized infrastructure almost, or at least transport, then keeping all the responsibilities on the national level and not coordinating them will not do the trick. There is practically one system globally, or one governance system on which we have to be proud, and it's called European Union. 70 years ago, we have decided that we will give up a lot of our own responsibilities on a higher level, which is called European Union, with only one reason. We wanted to avoid conflicts and war in the future. By the way, challenges which we are globally facing are pretty much the same challenges today. If we will not raise our governance to a higher level, by the way, COP23, climate change and so on, it's exactly that. If we don't try to find solutions together, we will fail, because each one will point on the other that he or she is not doing their job. So we should be proud as Europeans for what we have achieved in the past. Now, going to the conclusions. You can call whatever the economic change, sustainable economy, low carbon economy, circular economy, green economy, resource efficient economy, energy efficient economy, decoupling, 3Rs, ecological civilization, cradle to cradle, bioeconomy, eco-economy, blue economy. By the way, we are using all those names in policy making. What we actually talk about is that new economic model based on sustainable consumption and production, integrating all pillars of sustainability. It's needed and necessary and unavoidable. As my good friend Pavan Sukhdev used to say, we have to fix a broken compass. Main points which I would like that they stay with you after this presentation. First, for the first time in human history, we face emergence of a single tightly coupled human, social, ecological system of planetary scope. Second, it's about system change. Without leadership and improved global governance, SDGs are only wishful thinking. Third, transition to a new economic model, integrating all pillars of sustainability should be in the center of our attention. Trade-offs among various SDGs are unavoidable. Sustainable consumption and production is the most efficient strategy to avoid them and create synergies. Circular economy, it's a very good concept to operationalize that in practice. We should refocus our efforts from addressing state and impacts to addressing the pressures and drivers. To translate you that, if in Europe we will be dealing with security and migration in a way like we are dealing, we will never solve the problem. If we are serious by dealing with those problems, focus on Africa, where the population is growing faster and where they will never be able to provide as many jobs they need, and they are our neighbors. And if we were facing the wave of migration, we will face tsunami in the future. Help them. Help their women and children to understand how important it is to go on the direction which we are and support them. Implementing SDGs should be priority of any government, defined in the strategic document, supported by indicators, monitoring, reporting, linked to the core economic policy decisions. All economic policies should be systematically adjusted. Synergies among climate change, bioeconomy, resource management, circular economy should be exploited. All levels, global, European, national, local, city, all stakeholders, public, private, financial sector, civil society, academia, should actively participate in the system change. Active dialogue with potential losers is necessary to make the transition fair and possible. Majority of people are living in urban areas. It is expected that in the future this percentage will increase. There is no sustainable future without sustainable cities. European Union is the best global governance pilot, an enormous wealth of good and bad examples in practice, but there is a need for a clear vision and leadership, which is lacking. Change will not appear by waiting for the leadership of others. Be the leaders on your level of governance and authority, in politics, in business, academia, local or city level. If we are to avoid globally extensive, intersystemic crises, frequent conflicts, then let's get serious about implementing what we have agreed in SDGs. Changes are unavoidable and humans are supposed to be intelligent, and it is high time to prove it. Many are saying that this is a story of gloom and doom. But in fact, any global transition, it's a major opportunity for those who are innovative, for those who dare. It's a major opportunity for new development and also for new jobs. And alternative, frankly, I would rather not talk and think about it because it's a story of gloom and doom. I will finish with the quotes done by Albert Einstein, who was the genius of our time, and they are really well explaining some of the things and some of the basic things which we have to take into account. He was saying insanity, it's doing the same things over and over again and expecting different results. When he was asked why it is that mankind has stretched so far as to discover the structure of the atom, but we have not been able to devise the political means to keep the atom from destroying us, he replied, "This is simple, my friend. It's because politics is more difficult than physics." And by the way, the story which I have explained to you is the story of physics. Unfortunately, we cannot change the physical rules. They will come after us. But we can manage them only by political will. And that's why it is so high responsibility with us. The last recommendation which Mr. Einstein would share with us how to deal with that is try not to become a man of success, but rather try to become a man of value. And I think this is extremely important, that it's guiding our lives. Ladies and gentlemen, the past cannot be changed, but the future is yet in our power. But do not forget, future has already arrived. Unfortunately, it is called present. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. You mentioned a couple of times the word transition. What is a reasonable time for that transition? A decade? 2? 3?
Yeah, very good question. I know two things. The things which I was explaining, it's happening, and it's happening all over the place. And it's happening too slow. I'm absolutely sure about these two statements. What is the time horizon which we talk about? I think we talk about decades, because if you talk about more, then we have a problem. When it comes to climate change, it's pretty clear, and we have pretty clear scenarios, because the story can be simplified in CO2, and actually everything goes from how much of the CO2 you can, and then you translate that to the story of the renewables and all the policies and so on. So that has been done by the science. While if you talk about the rest, about the cities, about resources and so on, it's a bit more difficult to say in what time frame we talk. So the only thing which I can say to you, it's going too slowly, but certainly the change has started. When I have first introduced, with the help of my Director General, Karel there, the circular economy concept in the European Commission, that was 2014. This is just 3 years ago. Now, practically, circular economy is all over the place. It's not only in Europe, all over the place. It's globally all over the place. But circular economy, in essence, for me, it's an instrument how we change the things in the bottom line, you need to talk about the transition of the economic system, the way we produce and consume. And whatever you do, you always have to organize the things in a way that us consumers will not feel that this is lowering the quality of life which we are living. But there are many things which simply were through the systems done in a way that are in a way unhuman. So we consumers don't actually want to have light bulbs because they are causing us only the problem. We want light. We actually don't need cars, we need mobility. We don't need refrigerators, we need cool and fresh food. These are the things in a way when we have to think. And there are very simple models which are bringing you closer to that possibility. I have mentioned a few times already an example which is easy to be understood. Michelin is now also not selling only tires, but it's selling also the kilometers of the use of tires. What is the difference in logic? If you are selling tires, you are the interest of the producer is to sell as many tires as possible. If you are selling kilometers of tires, the interest is to sell as much of the service, which means that your interest is that the tires would last longer, that the tires could be remanufactured, material would be saved, and the influence on environment and health would be lower. So with the simple changes which are currently becoming our part of life, I think we can do the things. The only problem is how to scale it up, because you deal really with a lot of resistance of the existing, of the interests which are there, which were in many times based on investment which were done in good faith. And people have, in many cases, very valid arguments why they would like to keep some of the things of the past. But if we don't move ahead and if we do not stimulate that transition, and that's why all the policies need to stimulate them, then we will absolutely be in a shortage of time.